Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 22nd of April of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, where the Russians continue their major spring and summer offensive operation. Today the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, stated that the Russian armed forces are regrouping and bringing up reserves at the front, which could indicate preparations for a new offensive, according to the Ukraine Armed Forces Commander-in-Chief Syrsky. So the Commander-in-Chief Syrsky is trying to tell us that the situation along the front line is very bad and most likely very difficult, and probably this is the reason why the European countries decided to intensify the mobilization process on the territory of Europe, and this is the reason why we start receiving so many updates from Ukraine itself about the same thing, about the mobilization process. So let's discuss the situation on the ground. Let's try to understand what exactly is happening and what we should expect next. And first let's talk about the Sumy direction, where probably another time during the week, since the beginning of the previous week, the map has been adjusted, and according to information we have, the Russians continue offensive operation in the direction of the settlement by the name of Krasnopolya. As for the previous 24 hours, we have additional changes on the ground. The Russians improved the infiltration area, and the Russians improved their positions along big forests to the northeast of Novodmitrivka. As for this forest, these are the changes on the ground between the dates. The Russians managed to take this part under complete control, and the Russians are entering the western parts of this big forest. Furthermore, the Russians continue improving their positions around the settlement of Taratutine. The village was taken several days ago, but yet the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation hasn't confirmed this information. We had a report on the 18th of April of 2026 that the Russians managed to establish complete control over the territory because the video was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and now we see that the Russians continue advancing. As of now, we see that the Russians are still very far from the settlement of Krasnopolya. It will take probably weeks before the Russians finish the battle for the villages of Novodmitrivka and Ryasne, but the Russians are on this process. Another important area is the northern direction, northeastern direction of the Sumy area. We are talking about the territory around the settlement of Miropolska, and these are the changes on the ground. The Russians improved their positions along the line of combat contact, and according to different sources, the Russians captured this forest to the southeast of the settlement of Miropolya. As for the village of Miropolya, we haven't received anything from this area probably for a week. As of now, we don't know for sure what is happening, but I would like to remind you that probably a week ago, pro-Russian sources stated that the Russians captured up to 40% of the settlement, and the Russians continued advancing. As of the end of the 22nd of April of 2026, as if you ask my opinion, the biggest question I have from my side is what is the status of the second defense layer. So to the north of the siege of Sumy, we're talking about the villages of Kharkiv and Krapivshina. The last report we received from this area, probably 2 weeks or something like this, the Russians entered this forest. The Russians captured the settlement of Mala Kharkiv. And due to the fact that neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians publish anything about this area, we believe that most likely in coming days we will receive additional changes on the ground, and these changes could be significant. As of the siege of Sumy, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians were attacking the city significantly with drones, and the sources are saying, the local sources reported that the Russians, as a result of another attack, destroyed a gas station on the territory of the city, so which means that the Russians are trying to reduce the Ukrainian logistic capabilities and to reduce the capabilities of their forces while redeploying their logistics, while redeploying troops and forces from and to the city of Sumy and the line of combat contact. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kharkiv direction. As for the previous 24 hours, we can make a conclusion that it seems that the Russians are going to take the city of Kharkiv in pincers from the northwestern direction, from the northeastern direction. It seems that from the southeastern direction. So let's discuss everything in details, and first let's talk about the northwestern direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates in this area. The most important update is that the Russians improved their positions, of course, significantly around the settlement of Veterinarna. and these are the changes on the ground between the dates, between the 20th and the 22nd of April of 2026. And as of this direction, during the previous days, we received lots of updates that the Russians were bombing and attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine through the entire line of combat contact to the northwest of the city of Kharkiv with aviation. Lots of temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine were destroyed as a result of Russian attacks with Amur missiles and with aviation. Explosions recorded around the settlement of Klinovo, Novostylovka, explosions recorded around the settlement of Pisarevka, and lots of explosions were recorded in the area of the city by the name of Bogodukhov. The city of Bogodukhov is a very important city because the city is located along the main railways that go between the city of Sumy and Kharkiv, which means that most likely the Russians were attacking either locomotive depots, or the Russians were attacking substations, or the Russians were attacking temporary deployment points. So the Russians were attacking everything that can improve or may improve Ukraine's positions along the front line. So when talking about this direction and summarizing everything that we have just discussed, it seems that the Russians have some plans, according to Ivan Syrsky, to begin offensive operation to the northwest of the city of Kharkiv, but not to attack the city of Kharkiv itself, but probably to attack in the direction of the settlement of Bogodukhov, just with one purpose: to establish either fire or physical control over the railways between the city of Kharkiv and the city of Sumy. If Russians can cut these railways or to establish physical control, this can lead to unpredictable consequences to the entire logistics and defense of Ukrainians in the northeastern part of Ukraine itself. As for the northeastern direction, the most northeastern direction of the Kharkiv region, we have lots of updates along the river of Vovcha. It seems that the front line in this area and the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine in this direction collapsed completely. So this is, for example, the situation at the beginning on the end of the 14th of April of 2026. So this is the situation. We just received reports that the Russians were advancing, but trying to take on the complete control of this big forest along the border, and starting from the 14th of April of 2026, the map has been adjusted significantly. Almost every single day or every 2 days we were adjusting the map, showing significant progress on the ground from the Russian side, and this is already the end of the 22nd of April, and according to the latest updates, the Russians have captured up to 50% of the settlement of Akhrimovka, which means that the Russians both improved their positions and crossed the river of Volcha in this area. The Russians are about to establish complete control over this part of this big Seversky Kadonets forest, and the Russians improved their positions in the northern parts of the settlement of Pokolyane, and the sources are saying that up to 50% of this settlement is already under complete Russian control. With this pace of offensive operation in coming 2 or 3 weeks, the Russians will take under complete control everything along this red line, and if it happens, we can say that the most northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region, we're talking about this territory, most likely would collapse automatically, and the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this area. Otherwise, they would be caught and collared by Russians, and this is going to be the end of the creation of the foothold along the river of Volcha in the most northeastern part of Kharkiv region. And from these positions, the Russians most likely will begin their major Kharkiv offensive operation. And while the Russians are creating this foothold in the most northeastern part of the Kharkiv region, we start receiving just significant updates from the city of Kupiansk itself, and it seems that the Russians are about to finish the battle for the city of Kupiansk, and this time once and for all. During the previous 24 hours, huge changes on the ground were recorded. As you can see, the Russians, according to different sources, managed to establish almost complete control over the western parts and the northwestern parts of the city of Kupiansk. This information was published by different sources. We have several reports that the Ukrainians left the city of Kupiansk for some reason. Very difficult to understand why. Maybe they left the city of Kupiansk because they urgently needed forces to stabilize the situation in the northeastern parts of Kharkiv region, but maybe they have redeployed forces to stabilize the situation in the northeastern part of Kharkiv region, but now they will have a crisis in the Kupiansk direction without any chances to stabilize. And we have this video that was published by pro-Russian sources, and here we can see how Russians were moving through the city of Kupiansk and how Russians were securing positions. As of now, the Russians are not able and they don't have time to secure every single building. At least this is exactly what the author of this video stated. So that is why the Russians came to the conclusion that the only way how to secure the city of Kupiansk as fast as possible is to destroy basements and to destroy former positions of the armed forces of Ukraine, where allegedly mines and explosives could be located. So that is why the Russians are moving very fast. They need to secure the city of Kupiansk as soon as possible, as fast as possible, and they need to create roads and logistic corridors to the western part. And with these corridors and with these secure areas, the Russians will be able to concentrate let's say city limit, the line, the border of the city with troops, and from these positions the Russians would be able to advance further. And of course, during this period of time and right after, the Russians will finish the mining and the clearing of the city of Kupiansk, but this is going to be a completely different story. Furthermore, the Russians, according to information we have, improved their positions in the area of the city of Kupiansk-Kozlovoy, still on the eastern bank of the river Voskol. But once again, the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, Gerasimov, several days ago stated that the eastern bank of the river Voskol is already under complete Russian control. But we still continue receiving updates that there must be still positions and pockets of resistance of the armed forces of Ukraine. And the Russians have intensified their activities significantly in the area of the settlement of Sinkova. During the previous 24 hours, lots of videos were published of how Russians were attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine with missiles of Almur type, and the Russians were attacking the settlement with aviation. So it seems that maybe the Russians will try to cross the river Voskol in the area of the settlement of Sinkova with the purpose to break through Ukraine's defense and to continue advancing further deep inside of the Kharkiv region, trying to cut the entire Kharkiv direction into several smaller pieces. So very complicated to understand what exactly is going to happen, but one thing is clear: the Ukrainians suffer huge problems with manpower. Currently there is a shortage of manpower, and it seems that as of the end of the 22nd of April of 2026, Ukrainians and Syrsky doesn't know where to get the gap, how to cover, how to reduce the gap. Now let's talk about the Sloviansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of updates. As you can see, according to the number of updates and icons from this area, this is one of the most intensive directions. The Russians, and the most important, answered the settlement of Rai-Oleksandrivka from the northeast. And these are the changes on the ground according to different sources and according to different mappers. And the most important, according to this video that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, in this video we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation right exactly at this point. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that the front line collapsed in the northeastern part of Rai-Oleksandrivka and the Russians answered the village. At the same time, the Russians intensified the bombardments of the western parts of the settlement, and it seems that the Russians are going to attack the village of Rai-Oleksandrivka also from the southwest, so trying to take the settlement in pincers. So in coming days, we might see additional offensive operation from this side. So we see that the Russians are intensifying their offensive, and another important thing is that these days we start receiving lots of updates from the area to the west of the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal, to the west of the settlements of Minkovka and Fyodorovka Drugaya. In this video we can see how the Russians were attacking these villages with multiple launch rocket systems, and furthermore today I thought and a crazy idea came to my mind that the Russians may try to cross the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal in this area, in the of these big activities of the Russian forces, something like this, with the purpose to establish complete control over the villages of Tikhonovka and Malinovka. The Russians might try to do this. Everything depends on the readiness of the Ukrainian forces, whether they are ready for this possible fast-lightning offensive operation or not. If the Ukrainians are not ready for this offensive and for this development of the situation, this can lead to complete collapse of the entire Kramatorsk defense, belt defense, and so on. The city of Kostiantynivka, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes were recorded in the eastern parts of the settlement. Despite the fact that the Russians are moving very slowly in this area, we see, and this is the most important, that they're moving every single day. We're adjusting several buildings, tens of buildings along this or that street, which means that the Russians are moving, not so fast, but they're moving. And with this pace of offensive operation, one thing is clear, that probably somewhere during June of 2026, the Russians might get the northern parts of the city of Kostiantynivka. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Dobropillia direction, where the Russians also intensify their offensive operation. But as for this direction, we don't see that the Russians are moving fast and that the Russians have big plans about this direction. Maybe the Russians are regrouping, and maybe the Russians are waiting for the next step of the armed forces of Ukraine, what they're going to do with the city of Kostiantynivka, Sloviansk, Kupiansk and Kharkiv. Maybe the Russians are waiting when the Ukrainians will take their forces and troops from this area, and when they redeploy them in one of the directions we've just discussed, and then the Russians will launch their offensive operation in this direction as well. So who knows, but as of now we are waiting for additional updates. The Zaporizhzhia direction, very heavy clashes were recorded in this area, and during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. According to information we have, the Russians managed to recapture completely the settlement of Kalinovskaya. The Russians managed to recapture the settlement of Stepova. The Russians continue advancing further towards the settlement of Verbova, and currently there are very heavy clashes. At the same time, the Ukrainians for some reason continue sending sabotage and reconnaissance groups further in the southern direction with the purpose to outflank the settlement of Uspianovka, but as of the end of the 22nd of April of 2026, it seems that this counter-offensive operation has become useless. But the Ukrainians continue their attempts to improve their positions, but as of now it's very difficult to understand what is the point of this counter-offensive operation. Maybe the Ukrainians are planning to do something, but it seems that as of now they have less and less chances to do something with this. You know that the Ukrainians are trying to break through Russia's defense and to get the line Rai-Oleksandrivka, but from this configuration of the map we see that Ukrainians with their own hands and by themselves are moving further and further in the pocket, and sooner or later the Ukrainians could be caught in cauldron. We're not talking about thousands of Ukrainians, but several hundreds of sabotage and reconnaissance groups and troops that are moving from the southern direction could be encircled by Russians if the Russians attack the Ukrainians between the settlements of Dobropillia, Radosne and Zlagada. So everything is possible. Maybe this is exactly what the Russians are waiting. The Russians are just waiting when the Ukrainians will collect a critical mass in these pockets, several hundreds of soldiers, and then they will encircle them. The Orikhiv direction, the most important updates are coming from the settlement of Verkhnya Tersa. Today, several pro-Russian sources stated that as a result of clashes, the Russians have captured up to 50% of the settlement, which means that in coming 2, 3 or 4 days, the group of forces East and the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm complete control of the territory. And this is going to be a breakthrough, because from the positions of the settlement of Verkhnya Tersa, the Russians will continue offensive operation further in the northern direction, and most likely the settlement of Zaporizhzhia would be cut by the Russians in pincers and in cauldron, which will either force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area in the western direction, or they would be encircled without any chances for evacuation. And it seems that the Russians have begun the artillery preparation of the settlement of Gulay-Polskaya. In this video we can see how the Russians were attacking the central part of the city, not just attacking, how the Russians were reducing till ruins the central part of the settlement with heavy flamethrower system. And this looks like artillery preparation, which means that in coming days we might receive additional changes on the ground in the area of this settlement as well. So we see that the main defense layer of the armed forces of Ukraine to the east of the city of Zaporizhzhia is collapsing, and in coming 5 days lots of things may change and might happen right exactly in this area. Also, during the previous night, the Russians carried out a massive attack through the entire territory of Ukraine. Lots of explosions were recorded in the area of the city of Zaporizhzhia. And for example, this morning we received lots of strange updates from pro-Ukrainian sources, and we got reports that the Russians launched Iskander-K cruise missile that was launched from the area of the Belgorod region, and this missile crossed almost through the entire territory of Ukraine. Ukraine, and this missile was maneuvering through the central part of Ukraine, and then lots of explosions were recorded on the territory of the city itself. And later we received the report that the Russians attacked the locomotive depot on the territory of the settlement of Zaporizhzhia, and we know that locomotives are very expensive and a very unique asset from the Ukrainian side, because due to power outages, due to problems with electricity, the only stable way how to bring reinforcements reserves is to use locomotives. And as you can see, according to this report, the Russians using cruise Iskander missile cat destroyed probably several locomotives in the area of the city of Zaporizhzhia, and not just destroyed, they basically blocked some railway service in this area. And all these things are happening during the major battle that is currently taking place between the settlements of Gulyai-Polska and Velika Mikhailovka-Pokrovska. Obviously, the attacks on these logistic infrastructure objects will cause problems to the Ukrainians along the line of combat contact. Furthermore, according to information we have, in coming 36 hours, the Ukrainians are waiting for another massive attack. The Russians, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, are going to use up to 500 drones and several dozens of missiles. And the Russians will attack the territory of Ukraine as a retaliatory strike to the situation that's happened on the territory of the city of Tuapse. I would like to remind you that several days ago the Ukrainians attacked the Tuapse refinery, and the Russians still haven't managed to stabilize the situation. The local sources are saying that the city of Tuapse has gone. It's impossible to live there anymore. The local sources are saying that there is oil rain in the city, that it's a very bad situation to open windows, and it's basically a disaster and ecological disaster, and the Russians may strike back due to this situation, and of course the Russians will try to do something similar most likely the next 36 hours, maybe even this upcoming night. Everything will happen, but due to the thing that the Russians are intensifying their offensive operation along the line of combat contact, it seems that everything is possible exactly during the upcoming nights between the 22nd and the 23rd of April of 2026. Another important thing that, according to information we have, the European Union adopted the 20th package of Russian sanctions, and the European Union approved the 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine. European Union ambassadors approved a 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine and the 20th round of sanctions against Russia. The sanctions have so far only been approved at the ambassador level. The final decision will be made on Friday, but most likely this decision will be made. At the same time, we start receiving reports that Ukrainians allowed the Russians to sell oil to the European countries. For example, today we got report from Slovakia. Ukraine has begun pumping oil through the Druzhba pipeline. Deliveries to Slovakia are expected to resume on April 23rd. So this is a very important situation. The Russians began selling oil to the European countries, and the Ukrainians received the 90 billion euro loan, and the Ukrainians managed to force the European countries to adopt the 20th sanction package. But the sources are saying that the 20th package of sanctions was significantly reduced and eased because currently we have the biggest oil crisis, fuel crisis, and energy crisis in the world. So that is why, according to this package, the Russian Federation is allowed to sell oil on the territory of the European countries, but using some certain ways how to do this. At the same time, we received a very interesting and very strange reports from the European countries. The sources are saying that Europe currently has huge problems with the fuel, and according to information we have, the European countries were forced to reduce the number of flights. For example, Lufthansa will cancel about 20,000 short-haul flights between May and October, cutting roughly 120 flights per day. The move is aimed at saving fuel after jet fuel prices doubled following the Iran conflict. But other sources are saying that currently the level of fuel, jet fuel in Europe is at the minimal level, and the sources are saying that this situation situation is connected first of all because the United States of America is using significantly the fuel of European countries. As you know, the United States of America is currently conducting significantly redeploying between the European countries and the Middle East, and there is a corridor of aircrafts that are flying between Europe and the Middle East, and the sources are saying that the United States of America, of course for money, but uses jet fuel of the European countries, and this situation leads to the situation that the level of fuel on the territory of Europe has reduced significantly. According to information we have, the United States of America requested more fuel, but the sources are saying that Europe doesn't have any more. So this is a very interesting situation, because if the second round of war in the Middle East resumes, then most likely there won't be any third round of any third round of war on the territory of the Middle East, because basically the United States of America will have no fuel for aircraft. So this is an opinion of different military experts on this matter. But the question is whether the Iranians are able to survive the current leadership is able to survive during the possible next round of clashes on the territory of the Middle East. This is the most important question. We know that this situation may happen in coming days, and we have lots of important updates on this matter. For example, according to information we have, the President of the United States of America stated that Trump is giving Iran's warring faction a short window to unify behind the coherent counter-offer or ceasefire he extended Tuesday ends. As a U.S. official stated that the U.S. is willing to give Iran a short window of time, approximately 3 to 5 days, to allow them to get their situation under control before ceasefire ends. So this is a very interesting 3 to 5 days, because different military experts stated that 3 to 5 days is exactly the number of days that the United States of America needs to finish the regrouping of the George Bush U.S. aircraft carrier group. So according to information we have, the carrier strike group is expected to arrive in the Middle East in 3-5 days. So as you can see, obviously these numbers between ceasefire and the redeployment of this aircraft strike carrier group has something common, which means that ceasefire will be finished right after the United States of America finishes its regrouping in the Middle East. And right after this moment, most likely the United States of America and the President Trump will issue another ultimatum to the Iranian side. As of now, the Strait of Hormuz is under blockade, but the sources are saying that as for the previous days, at least 34 tankers managed to bypass the U.S. Navy blockade since it began. And from the other side, the Iranians are not allowing anybody to cross the Strait of Hormuz. For example, just today we received reports that at least 3 vessels linked to Israel and the United States of America were attacked by the Iranian Navy, which is a very important situation. And the sources are saying that the Iranians using very fast boats that the United States of America can't find and can't destroy it. Here we have fresh satellite pictures, and these satellite images that were made today shown what looks like a flotilla of Iran. Fast attack crafts sailing north of Strait of Hormuz near Kargan coast. At least 33 boats can be seen in what looks like a show of force enforcing the strait closer by Iran. So the Iranians are using these fast boats, and the United States of America are not able to do anything with them, because not just because they can't destroy them, it's useless to destroy them, because obviously that if the United States of America and Israel destroy these 33 bombs, they will spend fuel, they will probably spend missiles, rockets, they will spend everything, lots of munition, arms, which is very expensive. Furthermore, they would be at a very high risk using their aircrafts in this area. They can be downed or damaged by the Iranian air defense forces. And even if they destroy these 33 boats or 100 drones, obviously the Iranian side will be able to, with the help of China, of course, to build a few more hundreds of boats of this type within weeks, because they're very expensive and they're very small, and you can use these boats to control the Strait of Hormuz without any problems. So this is a very big problem for the coalition, because currently there is no solution for this situation. The oil prices are growing, and as of the end of the 22nd of April of 2026, the oil prices were on the level of $93 per barrel for WTI and $101 per Brent crude, which means that oil prices continue growing despite ceasefire, despite all the statements that were made both by the President of the United States of America and the Iranian side, because it seems that traders and investors expect that most likely in coming days the situation will worsen significantly, and we might see the second round of the Persian War, the war in the Middle East. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds you we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.